Welcome to Artist Alchemy All. I'm John Cruz. I'm a portrait photographer in Philadelphia in the US.
Hi, I'm Steph. I'm a fantasy and surreal photographer in Lincoln in the UK.
And today our guest is Jess Noel from Philly Pack, a performance arts theater located actually not a couple blocks from where I'm sitting right now in Philadelphia. Jess, thanks for taking the time to stop by today.
Thanks for having me, John and Steph. I'm excited.
And I really want to jump into I know that you do I probably know about 20% about what goes on in that building because it seems like you always got something new going on. So I got this is just a casual conversation. We like to unpack that stuff. And I don't know if you heard from a previous episode, you said you caught a couple, but like Steph started out training performance arts like for West End Theater back in the day. So like it's kind of her space as well.
Amazing. And theater people love theater people.
Yeah, I love theatre. Even now I'm not really involved in it, I still love it.
Well, it's funny. I was talking to my mom about it a couple of weeks ago. I was just like, in where I grew up, we had my high school and like my elementary school, and it was very artist focused. Like I learned music early, I learned arts early, I learned all of these things, and talented people came out of my high school. We didn't have a theater program. Like to do a theater program would be at the high school, the big high school not far from us, the other like in the town over. They had a big theater program. It's a huge deal, but like I never grew up with that in my DNA. It was just not part of what we grew up in our background. So I love the fact that you're providing that in a space that's not necessarily the kids can come to. So why don't you tell us a little bit about like what you're doing there?
We're primarily a theater and dance education center, and that's how PAC started was theater and dance education. We started really small. I asked a principal at a local elementary school if I could rent their auditorium after school and hold like little education classes. I love teaching. It's my number one passion. And so I thought this would be like a really fun way to dip my toes back into teaching after I had my baby. So this was 13, almost 14 years ago. And so that's how PAC started. And then in the elementary school, the program quickly grew and kids were coming from other schools. And I knew that it was time to sign a commercial lease and get us out of the public school and into our own rehearsal space where I could hold classes until 8:30, 9:30 at night. Mm-hmm. And so it really just sort of took on a life of its own. And I buckled my seatbelt and just said, okay, like I'm here for the ride. And our first commercial space was a 700 square foot storefront on 4th Street, John. So on that commercial corridor, it's actually where Walter Pine, the plant store is.
Yes.
It was our first commercial space.
Oh, wow.
And we were there for 4 years. And then I signed the lease for this space because we had been renting theater space. We would rehearse in the little 700 square foot spot, and then we would rent and do our performances in the theater. And it was so expensive. It's so expensive to rent theater space. So I thought like, there's gotta be a space that could be our classroom and our performance venue. And that's what you're seeing right now.
I was just going to say, is that it behind you? That looks like a great space.
Thank you. This is our classroom. And it transitions into our performance venue. We black out the lights that are coming in through the windows. And we do like a lot of tech, a lot of projection, LED lighting. Like John's been to some of our shows. The space really does turn into a 150 seat theater. So It's pretty cool.
That's very cool. And what age do you kind of start at and go up to with the kids?
Our students start with us at 3, and we have them until 15, 16 years old. And then this fall, we're launching a program for 17 and 18-year-olds.
Oh, wow.
So we're really trying to take our students all the way through to the pre-collegiate level so that they can decide if they want to study theater and music and dance and directing and producing. Like if they want to study that in college, we want PAC to be
Where they
their,
started.
yeah, their nest. Yeah.
Yeah, that's really cool. I was going to ask actually, is everyone who comes people who want to do this as a career? But I guess you get a bit of both, right? You get some that are just doing it because they like it and some that they
Yeah.
want to take it really seriously.
Yeah, we get a lot of kids whose parents say they're dealing with a lot of shyness and maybe like social anxiety, but then when no one's looking, they're dancing to the music that they put on in their bedroom, and we think there's something in there. And so the students come here, and we really tried to provide like a safety platform where kids just feel really safe and secure, like they can experiment and try things and no one's going to make fun of them. No one's going to judge them. Like that's what's such a huge part of the model.
That's
And
really cool.
I think it's been successful. I think that what we're seeing is a longevity of kids sticking with us and studying with us throughout their entire childhood.
Oh wow,
That's
that's quite
amazing.
cool.
It's
It's
really
like
cool.
like the adolescent brain is creative by nature. I forget. I want to say there was a Picasso quote about like we all start as artists and then some of us grow out of it. But like every kid is an artist in some way and has creativity and has a need to express themselves. So I think it's wonderful to like you give them a space to say, okay, we're gonna make something now. Like that energy is awesome, but let's see what we can do with that now.
You're absolutely right. Like it lives in them just by default. Kids are natural storytellers. And like
Yeah.
we all remember that, right? When we were children, we all remember like telling these huge stories to ourselves or to our friends in our imagination and acting them out and putting on costumes and making our parents watch. Like we all did that.
Yeah.
And I think it's really cool that when the kids come here, they realize like, oh, there's a platform where I can do that. And like, it's a legit art form. Like, I think it sort of validates them a little bit.
Yeah, that's
My
really
mom likes
cool.
to tell a story of seeing like dust come out of my room and coming upstairs and going in. And I guess I had all my Star Wars figures out, and I guess I had just seen Empire Strikes Back. So I recreated with talcum powder the snow planet. I just covered the bed in this talcum powder, and I had them marching in the snow and this whole thing. And she said, like, she's surprised I don't have like respiratory issues from it. Like, it was just like she'll like scoop me out there and then
That's
go
so
clean my
funny.
whole room up. Like,
You're like,
Oh God, I
Hog
bet that was
must have
difficult.
the snow.
You want us to be authentic, John? So tell me about your shows. Are they, do you guys write them? Do you take shows and produce them there? Like, how does it work? How do you come up with it?
We do a combination
Okay.
for kindergarten through 8th grade. I write our adaptations, and
Nice.
I started writing them like 14 years ago, and then I hired a playwright for a few years, Monica Flory, and we would work together to build the adaptations. And then Monica has recently taken more directing jobs all over the place, not just in Philly, but all over. And so I'm back to writing the adaptations, and I hadn't done it for about 10 years. And now it's back in my life. And I'm remembering like how much I love it. And it's been like a really nourishing part of my job that's sort of like back. And I get to go into the text, go into the storybooks. They're like classic children's literature. Like right now, I'm adapting Boxcar Children from 1924.
Oh, wow.
And it's just so cool. It's become like this really special thing that I'm excited is back in my life. And then for the teenagers, we usually pay for royalties for a script, and I start reading tons of scripts like around Christmas time, just trying to find like exactly the right thing that we want to do with our 13, 14, 15-year-olds. And then with our oldest kids, the program that we're just about to launch, we're encouraging them to write. So we're
Oh,
yeah,
wow.
wanting them to devise and produce their own work. So
Because
there's a lot
that,
of scripts.
that's a whole different skill set in itself, isn't it? There's one thing being able to act and perform on stage, and then another one to be able to devise like and imagine the whole script, and especially for you as well, adapting things as well. That's a whole different skill set to directing as well and teaching.
Yeah,
So
so I wanted to
amazing.
go into like that process of adaptation. So you take you take a 100-year-old story, and what are the constraints that you start to apply to yourself? Is it like, okay, I'm gonna take the story I have a time limit that I'm working with, I have dialogue that a kid can remember. I have a space that I need, I need to do a set of some sort, but I need it to be, fluid enough that we can you know, have changes and things like that without it being too disrupting. So what are some of the constraints you apply and just go, okay, now I can convert this story? Like, how does that work?
Well, the first thing I look at is number of characters. So, we have about 100 children that participate in the Boxcar Children. And so the first thing I do is I go into the text, and like, we know that we have the 4 siblings, right? We know that we have these 4 main characters that are going to pull the story along from start to finish. But then where do the rest of the 96 kids come in?
Yeah.
And that's where this adapting muscle that I'm using again is like, so it's brain on fire, because I'm looking at the text and I'm saying, wait, there's a rainstorm, and that's like a whole character. And there's the kids that are in the foot race in the town. They have a field day in one scene, and there's like a huge foot race, and there's a $25 prize, whoever wins the foot race. And so you've got those kids that are runners in the race. That's a character. And it's about pulling like all of these different characters out of the 100-year-old text and kind of fleshing them out and making them interesting for us to work a whole semester on, if that makes sense.
Yeah, like
that's
when you say that, like I don't know anything. Like I said, I have no background in theater, but like I could totally see like Rain being an entire dance sequence. Like, okay, we're going to introduce Rain, and then that becomes like a little dance sequence, and then you move on to and it gives you an opportunity to move on to the next section of the story.
This is so fun because you're speaking my heart language. Like at PAC, our students get really excited about things like I'm a rainstorm. And I feel so lucky that the kids who come here are the ones that drop into character work. So if they study dance at PAC, they know that they're studying storytelling dance.
Mm-hmm.
So not only are they learning dance technique, but they're also taking on character development, which I'm really proud of.
Yeah, that's very cool. And do they have to audition for these parts, or even to get into the class, do they audition? How do you work it?
We have we have an intense audition process here, but we try to frame it in like a safety net way. So we have like all of these boundaries within the audition process. For example, if it's vocalization day and we're all singing in front of each other, the rest of the PAC students know that when there's someone up there on stage singing an audition moment, the kids in the audience know not to lean over and whisper to their friends, because even if they're just saying like, hey, what did you have for lunch today? Like to that person who's up on stage, they could think that they're being made fun of or something. Yeah. And so we talk a lot at PAC about how important it is to be a respectful audience member. And I'm really proud of that. I feel like the kids who work through the PAC program, not only do they know how to be strong storytellers, but they also know how to be really respectful audience members. And so that's like a huge part of our audition process, is learning how to support your friends who are up there and are doing something really scary, because auditioning is scary.
Yeah.
but to be able to support your friends while they're doing something that takes so much bravery, that's like a huge thing here.
Yeah. And I mean, it's a life skill in itself, isn't it? Again, like learning how to be respectful, like listening to what's being said if someone's speaking. That's a life skill, isn't it? How
Exactly.
often do you train then? Like, is it every week? Is it once a week? Is it how do you guys do it?
It depends on the age. So with our littles, we see them for 45 minutes a week. And with our oldest kids, we see them 2, 3, 4, 5 hours a week. So like our oldest students are here multiple nights a week. So it really just depends on the age. And I guess that makes sense when you think about like the lead roles are going to the oldest kids because they're the ones with the skills and the capacity to take on a storytelling role like that. And so it makes sense that they would be here more days per week to take on the larger roles. Yeah.
And did you study it yourself in college? Like, how did I know you said, oh, you'd kind of gone back to your roots after having a baby, but before that, like, has it been like, is it been something that you did from when you were very young, or did you just start it when you were an adult and then you found out you loved it? Like, how did that journey kind of go?
My mom put me in theater and dance when I was 3, and she just saw in me this like storytelling bug that I had, and she put me in. I started in ballet classes, and then when I was 5 years old, I started my first theater class, and I was just hooked. And we moved around a lot when I was a kid because my dad's job took us all over the place. And it was kind of this like safety, security, home base that I always had. No matter where we moved, my mom would always find a dance studio and a theater spot where I could make theater. And so I always felt rooted in community because theater is such a community builder, as you know. Yeah. So I always, no matter what, I never felt like alone because that was the first thing that my mom did. So it was very natural when I got to college. At first, I thought I was an education major because I thought like that I needed a teaching certificate to be a theater teacher. So I started as an education major, but I quickly gravitated to the theater department. And like within my first couple semesters, I had switched majors. And so I left education department, moved into theater department, and I realized that I could specialize in adapting, writing, storytelling for education. And I didn't have to be an education major. I could be a theater major and still be a theater teacher. So yeah, that's my background.
That's very cool.
Interesting.
It's when you were talking about like bouncing around too, like I would suspect that kids who are involved in theater, you get very used to joining a new cast, figuring out who's who, playing a new role. And it's almost like that's a skill set for somebody who moves around a lot because you are now surrounded by a new set of kids and you got to like figure out the dynamics of that group. And I would think that your background, having done that, being trained in that way, made it easier for you to navigate moves. You know?
Yeah. And I ask myself this question a lot. Like I am addicted to the rhythm of the theater, which is like put up a show, close the show, next. And I'm on this like 12-week cycle, and it definitely lives in me. And I think it was ingrained in me from childhood. And now I'm just like addicted to it. And my rhythm now, like it's just the way I roll. About every 12 weeks, we close something up and move on to the next.
That's a really quick turnaround, actually, isn't it? 12 weeks.
Yeah. Although professional theaters, they work on 6 to 8 weeks. So education theater, we take a little bit more time. But yeah, I'm always impressed with my friends that are professional actors, like in regional theater or Broadway friends. They work fast. They put a show
Yeah.
up like a lot quicker than we do, but it's because we're working with young people. So it just,
Yeah.
you know, you can imagine it just takes a little bit more time.
Yeah, but also the professionals are doing it rehearsing all day, whereas you guys just have the evenings, right? So
Exactly. Because yeah, they're in school during the day. And
right,
they
so
come
that's
out
even
of
more
school,
demanding. Yeah,
and
yeah.
they're
And
fried.
you have people that are specialized, like you have an entire set design department who's handling that part. You have the director who's probably orchestrating, but you have people who are handling all the different pieces, and you guys are. I love that when I saw that you were. Is it correct me if I'm wrong? Is it called Pack Lab, like the older kid thing? When I
Yeah,
saw you
we're
posted
lucky.
that, I love the idea of that. Like, you've been working in the space for a little bit. Now you're going to get some exposure to learn how to do all of it, and I love that they can pick and they can learn how the entire process works, and then they can start to focus on what do they love the most. And is it is it writing, is it directing, is it acting? Like I love the idea that they get to be exposed to all the parts. How did you come up with that program?
Thank you, first of all, for saying that. I'm really excited. This is our first semester to launch Pack Lab, and it seems like the natural progression of where our program goes. Because for 14 years, I've been sitting back, like looking at our students, and once they get to about 15, 16 years old, like they are fully equipped to make their own work. And I wanted to interject here. We have a production designer on staff at PAC. Her name is Kat Caro, and she runs costume design, set design, puppet design, and she
Wow.
has a whole sector of our students that come just for production design. So that was also part of Pack Lab, is that not only do we have these kids who love to perform, and we have some kids that we know they want to direct and they want to write, but we also have a ton of kids who want to design. So we figured it was time to launch this program and just like see what they can make and give them no rules, no boundaries, like whatever you want to make, we want to facilitate it. I think that's important because theater is changing. With Gen Z is coming like a whole new theater. I'm sure that you've noticed like theater is not what it used to be. It's
Yeah.
very quickly changing post-pandemic. And I think that it's the 15, 16, 17, 18-year-olds that are going to decide what the new theater is. And so
Yeah.
we're really excited to see what they make.
I just
I'm
think it's ace that you've got a whole thing just for design, like no rules. I'm like, can I join?
Yeah,
That's
I
so
know.
cool,
Steph, we keep coming up with reasons that you have to come to Philadelphia for like to check things out.
right?
Oh, yes. Please come visit, Steph. I would love to give
I,
you a tour. Like behind these doors right here is our whole
yeah.
backstage, like design department.
Oh, love it. Sounds really cool. Like
It's
that would have been my dream as a child. Like John's mentioned about his high school having stuff. I know you're not in a high school, you're a separate thing, but we didn't have anything like that in my school. Like we didn't even have drama, like a drama department at all. Or we had like music, but that was about it. So everything I did that was theatrical had to be outside. So but we didn't have, it was just, oh, you do dance or you do acting. That
yeah.
was it,
Mhm.
which I did both of. But I love that you've got that extra thing as well, because I would have like lost my mind, like, whoa, this is amazing.
I
So
mean,
yeah, very cool.
it happened very naturally. We started seeing our kids just gravitate to Cat and say, like, can I help you make something? And they were here for rehearsal, but there was
Yeah.
like a whole sector of the kids that were supposed to be rehearsing that just wanted to like be in Cat's corner, like hot gluing and stuff.
Yeah.
And so it happened really naturally. Like we knew we needed a design department with classes that the kids can come just make pieces for the shows.
Yeah, yeah. Do you
And
know what
and
I'm
even
thinking
that, when you
sitting
think about
there?
that skill set, like like because my background, I went to architecture school, and you think about like, okay, you have these constraints, you have these building materials, you have this budget. Now you got to make it do this, and figuring that out. And I love that that you're getting them so early to learn how to problem solve through design. Because okay, we got to make this into, this has to look like a city, or this has to look like, something that's believable from, from 50 feet away. Like, what is that going to look like? Okay, these are the parks we have. I love that idea. But Steph, were we gonna?
Yeah, sorry. I was just gonna say, with you developing into that, you've gone from acting and dancing and singing to developing the design side. And then you spoke about how Gen Z are changing theatre now. Obviously, video has exploded. So would you consider like teaching them like film stuff or like behind the scenes of how to work a camera? I'm just thinking from from not that I do a bit of videography, but more camera stuff. I was thinking that's all. But I was like, oh, that's another skill set that kind of entwines into that world as well.
Steph, that's what we're trying to do post-pandemic, because
Oh.
we had to shut down for 14 months because Philadelphia made us. As John is familiar with, there was some really strict rules about what businesses could and could not do. And
Yeah.
so we moved on to Zoom, and we did Zoom classroom for our theater program for 14 months. And when we transitioned back into the space, we had all of these new video skills. And our kids had already, just by accident, we had started training with a camera. So we have since pandemic been incorporating film and video elements. So I want to be really specific about that. I want so much to maintain the integrity of theater, which is live with a gathering and
Yeah.
exchange. Like, that's what I want, is for us to be a theater school. So I don't want us to transition into being a film school, but what's really fun is integrating film elements. So for example, Kat, our production designer, has incorporated stop motion photography that we project onto the back wall during scenes where there's like actors portraying a certain moment, and then all of a sudden a stop motion photography film for the audience to take a little break and like tune into the storytelling using a different medium. So we've done we've done some of that. And I think that we're segueing into more and more and more of that while still maintaining theater as our primary medium, if that makes sense.
Oh yeah, total sense. That's very
Yeah,
cool.
I was going to ask you about, because like a couple of weeks ago, we talked to a friend I grew up with who's a filmmaker, and he was saying, like, our generation, like, he's like, I want this thing that he's working on right now that's coming out in the fall to be on a big screen, because that's our generation. But he said in reality, most people are going to watch it on their phone. But like, for me, like, theater is still a third place. It's a place to gather. It's because people aren't going to the movie theater anymore, but theater gives you a reason to go to the thing, because the show's going to be different, because the mood's going to be different. So I love that you're keeping the integrity of, like, we're still going to be here as a place for you to show up and experience something as a group with each other.
Yeah. That's that's part. I talked about my addiction, my rhythm, that I'm in my 12-week like compulsion. But also, like, a huge part of that is in person with other people. So that will always be what PAC is. PAC will always be this like gathering place with an exchange of energy between performers and audience, because that's theater, that's my medium. So it will always be that way, even if, like, no matter what we have to do, even if we physically can't gather. Like, this is what I learned, is there's ways of gathering even if you can't physically be together. Like, we jumped on virtual platform, all the theater people jumped on virtual platform, and it was really painful, but we did what we had to do. But then with PAC, we started making outdoor theater, and so that became like a huge thing for the kids. Like, they met me in Jefferson Park right here, John, like just right behind this space stuff is like a huge neighborhood park. And my students met me there in that, and we made theater in the park.
Amazing.
We did that.
Did you have people come to to watch it, like an audience come to watch it in the park?
Yeah, their parents and their neighbors and their friends brought
that's so
camp
cute.
chairs and blankets, and we did outdoor theater. And I want to say we did that for like 10 months. Like we did it for
Wow.
a while, and it was amazing.
And
It was
tricky
pretty.
circumstances.
I didn't catch any of the park shows, but just the park in general becoming a gathering space during the pandemic, which is, it was kind of like overwhelming to see. Like it was just because it was people couldn't gather inside, so they would go set up their little chairs at the park with a cooler and just kind of hang out for a couple hours, and then you saw these and everybody had their spaces in the park, and it was really cool to see.
Yeah,
That's one good thing that came out of it. Hey, like people actually coming together. Sort
yeah,
of
we learned
distance
a
together.
lot, right? Like it was an extremely painful time, but we learned so much about ourselves and how to be together. It was cool.
Yeah, it's very
I
cool.
guess it was cool.
So it seems like it's developing quite a lot. Do you think it would ever get to the point where you would become almost like a theatre college, I guess? Like, would you train people up who, like, I'm now 18, I want to come to your college? Can you see that it going that direction, or?
Well, in 2021, we launched an adult company. So we do have adults in here making work, and
Amazing.
it's not really a training platform. It's more just like a group of theater adults that want to devise and create something from scratch.
Mhm.
And so that's interesting that you said like a pack college. I never say never, right? Like, sure, maybe. I don't know. I don't
Well,
know if that's
it's funny the way you were talking about it. I just watched the last movie stars about Paul Newman and Joanne Woodward, and they had like old footage of them at the original actor studio where it was the two of them. It was Marlon Brando, it was James Dean. It was like all of these, like no one knew them yet, but they would gather at this place. They had to sign up to get in, and they would gather at this place, and they would help each other work on their craft. And then they all went. Several of them went on to like become icons. But it feels like you're creating that space where people can come, even if they're not working on the specific thing. We're going to work on this stuff together. Because do you have people? Because you've been in business for a while now. Do you have like alumni coming back in and saying, hanging out and like, let me let me help out a
Oh,
little bit?
Speaking of alumni, like my first students they've graduated from college and they're out there making work. And like one of my students makes experimental performance art in like downtown Manhattan. Like it is so cool to see what she's doing. And it's also like very validating. Like I'm seeing my kids out there like making such great work. I have students that are studying costume design now in college, fashion design, dance, music. So like it's very cool. It's like the kids that are coming and studying here. I guess PAC is sort of helping like guide the next like generation of theater people a little bit.
How cool is it to be able to say that though? Can you
Yeah.
imagine if one of them like went off to Hollywood and became a big star, and you'd be like, how proud would you be? Like, oh, I planted that seed.
I would be so proud. I mean, I am so proud of all of
Yeah.
them. And I don't get to see all of them, but sometimes an alumni will pop into the space. And the kids who are here studying know that person because, when they were little, like when they were 4 years old, this was like the really cool 15-year-old making work at PAC. And now, so when the alumni pop in, it is like a really special big deal for the current students.
Ah, that's so cute. And it's so sweet that they've still got that relationship where they're like, oh, like looking up to them. That's really nice.
And thanks to Instagram, like I get to still have relationships with my former students. We follow each other. I get to see what they're up to. I'm always like, break a leg.
Oh, that's cute.
Cool.
So going back to because you've mentioned the ones who've gone on to do this in college and now are creating stuff themselves. Going back to what you said at the beginning, where you said parents sometimes bring in kids that are shy or anxious, like how do you navigate that? Like you're a stranger to them, right? They might not have done this before, and the parents have told you they're a bit shy. Like how do you navigate that?
Well, the first thing I want you both to know is we don't ever force anyone up on stage, and we never ever force a child to perform. So that's just like so important that you know that. Like it's one of my like number one very important like boundaries that we have here is kids can come into the space, and if they spend a whole semester just observing and they sit the whole semester and just like take in like what is happening, that's good enough for me.
Okay.
But for the most part, kids who come after a few weeks of observing, like after a couple classes, they're ready to jump up. And I think that's because they feel that we're safe, and we are safe here. Like this is a group of teaching artists that like I've cultivated our team over 14 years, and the people who work here are all like-minded, and we all have the same goal, which is like just help the kids fall in love with theater. If they never get up on stage ever, that's fine. That's not what it's about. It's about them falling in love with the process.
Yeah.
But it's very rare that we don't have a kid perform. Like usually even the super anxious ones that come to PAC, at the end of the session, they're up on stage. And like, that makes me really proud.
Yeah, that says a lot about you actually, and how the whole school's like kind of guided if you're getting kids to do that, right?
Well, and I
Thanks.
also think and Steph, you and I have talked about this from a creativity standpoint, especially in this highly curated world of social media where everyone's a brand and everybody's perfect, is that seeing the process and seeing that, like, if you're sitting there for enough time, you're going to see that everyone has made mistakes multiple times throughout the weeks. You're like, oh, like this isn't like creativity isn't like we talked about in the first show. Creativity is not a straight line. Creativity is a mess. And it's about like finding it and making enough mistakes that you go, okay, now I feel comfortable doing what I'm doing. But like, I think that just observing everyone and the chaos of it would say, oh, like, oh, this isn't, people don't just get up on stage and they're perfect. That's not how any of this works. And I think that that's a way to, and even from a beyond theater, from a self-esteem standpoint, they're looking at curated stuff on social media, and it's all like filters and edited and everything else. And to see like, no, real life creativity is all of this. Like, I think it gives them a sense of like self-confidence to say mistakes are okay, because that's
Yeah.
what makes things better, you know?
We're constantly in this space. We're constantly saying release perfection, release it, like let it go, because it doesn't serve us to hold on to the anxiety of trying to be perfect, right? And like, you're absolutely right. The best work is made out of mistakes. Like that's when like magic happens. So we're really trying to instill that in our students, is like, just let go the pressure that you're putting on yourself to be perfect. Just let it go.
I love the language you use for this. Like,
yeah, I love that. Like the release mistakes, like when a friend of mine who was a designer used to say, like, yeah, perfection is the enemy of good, and you got to keep moving. But there was Rick Rubin recently came out with a book on creativity that he kind of developed based upon producing, for 30 years of music. And he said in an interview I heard, he was talking about, like, he said, when this sometimes it's 2 mistakes and sometimes it's 5 mistakes. And he said, I'm not trying to eliminate the mistakes. I'm trying to find which ones are the best ones to make that song magic. And he said, like, so I just let them go. And I just say, okay, oh no, those 2 mistakes are staying in and we've just taped it. And that's the end of that,
Right. And if you hadn't allowed yourself the space to make mistakes, you never would have found those notes.
Right. It's the difference between art is inherently human and humans aren't perfect. So if it's going to be a human expression, it's going to have some mistakes in it because that's the only way it works.
Yeah, I love that. That's definitely like a huge part of my life.
Otherwise,
So
it's
what?
AI. Like we talked about this. Like, otherwise, it's going
Oh
to be
yeah.
AI, and yeah, and that's when you can tell. Like it's just not human. It doesn't feel right.
I've started seeing AI videos recently, and it was an AI character, and I was like, what is wrong with that face? And then I was like, oh my god, that's an AI person, and it was really freaky. And I was like, they've tried to make it look like human expressions, but it was still odd. Like I was like, oh. Anyway, sorry, I digress.
I always like to
um,
think, I always like to think of the creative behind the AI. Like when I see
okay.
AI, I always like to think about the human that's
Mhm.
behind the scenes, like
Yeah.
developing and writing the code. You
Yeah,
know,
yeah.
that's just kind of
And
something
if
that,
they've made it like themselves or something, what
yeah,
they
yeah,
based
yeah.
it on.
Yeah, I'm
Yeah, yeah.
curious. Yeah.
So getting back to yours, what's your kind of big dream for your school? What's your big dream? Where it 10 years time, where would you like to see it be? Or do you want to carry on it as it is and just keep flourishing with lots of children? Like what do you want to do?
Um, that's such a hard question because it changes all the time. Like
Okay.
I I constantly or sometimes I say like this is enough. We are enough. I am enough. This is exactly what I need to be doing. Like sometimes, I do a lot of work on just being present. And so I'm trying to really like take in where I am in this moment. But I have big dreams for us. I can't help it. They just live in my head. And I would love to see the company in a 350 seat to 450 seat capacity theater. Like
Nice.
I would love for that to be in our future. But as we all know, space is expensive. And so like this is where we are right now. But I guess I'll just put it out there in the universe that if ever the stars align and the time is right for PAC to move into 350, 450 seat, then I mean, I'm going to jump at it.
Orchestra pit. We now have a music program. We're doing the whole thing.
Yeah, I mean, there are spaces in this city that are so delicious. And I mean, I just like I salivate when I enter these spaces and I think like to run programming out of this, it feels like the next level,
Yeah. Yeah.
But I want to go back to what I said a second ago. Like, I'm so grateful for where we are right now. And I really try to be present. Like that's something else that pandemic taught me is like, be here now. Like, don't miss where you are in this moment. But if the opportunity, if the opportunity arises, I'm jumping.
If
Good to
anybody's
have it in
listening who
yourself.
happens to have one, yeah.
Yeah.
So I want to take us back to the beginning for a second, because I want to talk about the future of theater. So Broadway took a huge hit during the pandemic and is starting to see a resurgence. But yeah, a show like Phantom closed after, I don't know, 30 some years. Like, and Philly has its own little theater scene, but it's mostly, the recycled Broadway. And you're starting to see a kind of a reboot of some of the shows that have been here. Every couple of years they come back around. So where do you see the future of theater? And Steph, for you and Jess, I know you guys are involved, like fringe arts and like, more of like the really niche performance art. Is we have a festival here. It's in about a month, right? Um, like where do you see all of these things coalescing and becoming like the future of performance art?
Thanks for asking. I love, like, this is my favorite thing to talk about. I think that we are standing in a precipice on the edge of the new theater. And I think that theater can't be what it's been. It has to change because we as a culture have changed so much in like the past 3 years, right? Like we've changed so much, I don't even recognize us. And so theater has to change because theater is the gathering place that's supposed to reflect the times. And I feel that we are stuck a little bit with trying to be what theater was. And we don't, like, our society doesn't fit anymore with what theater was. And so, like, for me personally, the work that I'm making with the adults is shorter. So that's the first thing, is like, we don't need to have 2.5 hour long shows with an intermission. Like we're dealing with a completely different attention span post-pandemic. So we need to be making stories that bring people together and offer them things to think about, but like in a manageable hour.
Mhm.
So like, that's the first thing that I want to see is shorter shows. And then the second thing that I want to see is, like, I'm a disciple of Brecht. And so I believe that theater is supposed to be political and it's supposed to stir up feelings. And that's the point of theater. Otherwise, people could just go to the movies, right? Like
Mhm.
theater is a place where we come together and we debate social, political ideas. And so I think that the theater that we need to be making right now should be reflective of like the politics of the moment. And I will always feel that way. Like I will always go to the political theater just because like that's what I'm most drawn to. By the way, I'm not talking about my education work. I
Yeah.
keep politics out of the work with kids because I feel that's a bit inappropriate. But
Yeah.
for the work that I make with adults, like we're constantly pushing in a social political direction
Well, I think that
because
that's the history of art,
yeah,
painting and music, and was always about it. Some critique on the society at large that artist happened to be living in at the moment, and it could have been a personal story, or it could have been a neighborhood story, or it could have been a global story. But they were making a commentary about how they see themselves in that moment, and so I think that's. And I also think that like it's right, like when the little kids are just trying to construct, you're just trying to teach them to construct a story. As they get older, it's like, okay, well then how do you tell a meaningful story? It's like you got to grow into that first. First, like
yeah.
figure out how to narrate, and then figure out how to make that narration really touch somebody and stir something in them. It's like that's a progression, it feels like.
And that's what the new theater should be doing. We should be stirring people's emotions and we should be speaking to like the stories of the moment. I know I sound very critical, but I'm just not sure if this is the moment when we need to be telling like, I don't want to throw any specific like names out there because, you know, I don't want to like throw any
Yeah.
company under the bus, but I just, you know, there's a lot of titles that are on current seasons and I just don't understand why. Like, I don't understand why we're telling that story right now. Like,
Yeah.
Yeah, well, I will, yeah, I will throw it, but like when you think about like some of the, the Andrew Lloyd Webber stories that they just keep coming around on tours, which I love them. When they're around, I go see them. But like, who's the next Andrew Lloyd Webber who's saying a new story? Is it,
yeah.
there was
Or
when you were talking about shorter, it was a Fringe Arts production. It was an opera where you just cycled in and out. Like they ran the opera on a loop. Everybody was on a beach, and the entire audience was above on a catwalk. So you just walk up the stairs, whatever, and you're looking down, and they all have mics on here, and everybody's just doing a thing, and you could just come in and out as you please,
was
because
it
it's
Sun
just
in the Sand?
yes,
I love that show.
yeah, it was fantastic.
That's what I'm talking about, is
Like
like
it's like
new theater.
yeah, it was just this. It was like I had never experienced like oh, there's no seats, there's no intermission. I don't know when this started. And it was just like you had these people that were just in, and you had background players, you had lead singers, and they were just performing from their own little blankets and doing their thing. And then when you were ready to leave, you just kind of walked out, and that was it.
Yeah,
And it
I
was just
love
it was such a tremendous, like, a different way to experience theater that I had never, like, gone through before. There's no
right. You
curtain. It never stopped you. It's almost like hopping on to Twitter. It's like, where are you at and where's the story going? And then you just swipe up and then you leave the app. Like, that's it. Like, it's just,
I went to something similar about a year ago, and it was immersive theatre, and they'd done like the story of Peter Pan, but they'd done like a dark twist on it where they sounds horrific, but it was really well done. Like that they were the lost boys were dead, but that sounds horrific. But it was really well done, and like it was similar to yours, John. You'd walk in the room, and there'd be one bit performing, and then a character would come up, and they'd literally speak to you and like, come here, and then you'd have to crawl through this like thing on the floor, and then you'd go into this tiny little room, and there might be like just 10 of you, but there was still another scene, that scene carrying on, but you'd gone into this next room where they were talking to you, and I really enjoyed that. It was just, you felt like you were one of the characters, like, okay, there we go.
Yeah, that's immersive theater is so exciting.
It's
And
really cool.
you talk about attention span, like nothing grips an audience more than like, follow me, theater. Follow me,
Yeah,
audience.
yeah, it was very cool.
it's almost like the merger of like theater and like haunted houses. Because like when you go to like Eastern State Penitentiary, and it's each scene is going on and you're wandering through and you're just like, okay, I'm going to experience this thing next. And you experience it with the group you're walking with. And it's just, and those cast members are doing that show on a loop,
There's a show in New York right now called Sleep No More. And it's the audience walks through sort of like an installation, and it's been hugely successful. Like that's what I'm talking about. That's what we're all talking about, right? Is like there's a way for theater to maintain its integrity. And we can even be retelling classics. I'm not against that. I'm just saying, like, if we're retelling classics, why? Why are we retelling them? Like, let's bring it to now. And yeah, I'm excited to see where theater's going. I think, theater will, it's the oldest of all of our art forms, right? Like cavemen were telling each other stories around the fire. Like theater's old, it's not going anywhere. It's just we're about to see like where it's going. And I'm excited about that. That's why we need to give young people platforms.
Yeah. If someone was I don't know, maybe 18, maybe 21, maybe, I don't know, maybe 35, I don't know. But they were like, do you know what? I would really like to do what you're doing. Like, I have a background in theatre where I'm really interested. I'd love to work with kids. Like, what would your advice be to them? What would be the first steps? How do they do it?
This sounds like, this sounds so embarrassingly American, but I'm just going to say,
Go on.
The first thing is get yourself some insurance, because if you're working with children, you want like a good, like general liability insurance policy. And like, knock on wood, I'm very thankful that, mine is just a security blanket, but I have really felt very free to do and create and build and make because I have insurance.
Yeah. That
Do you know
makes
what I
sense.
think? Does that sound
I
so
think that's
easy?
really sensible. I think that's, really sensible.
Yeah, it's just like, it's funny that you say that, because that was like one of the first things, like when I went into portrait photography, I'm like, I was talking to my accountant, like, number one, do you have business insurance? Because you're gonna be on site with these people, like, and I'm like, no, I don't. And like, you're gonna make that phone call right now and then call me back.
Honestly, like, I mean, I don't know how the UK is stuff, but in
It's
America,
the first thing I did too, is get insurance before I did my first ever shoot.
And I've had young people say like, hey, where do I start? And that's like always the first thing I say is like, number one, get yourself some insurance, and then the sky's the limit. Like, be free to build and create and follow your heart, but like, get some insurance.
Yeah.
Because you could grow into a space, like you could start doing, we're gonna do it in the park, we're gonna meet
Yeah.
on Saturdays, and we're gonna pretend, and you know, and you get that early, like you could start anywhere really, like if you had the passion for it.
Absolutely. I mean, I started in an auditorium in an elementary school. You know, like you can do whatever you want to do, but coverage is so good. It's so
Yeah.
good to be covered.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
also, like, I feel like it legitimizes me with customers. You know,
Mhm.
like we're an insured LLC. Like I feel like that gives parents a sense of security and safety.
Yeah.
So
Well, not only that, but also, you know, there's props about, there's lighting about, there's things they can trip over, or, you know, kids can be clumsy sometimes, as can adults. So, you know,
yeah,
it's that kind of safety as well as anything else that might
yeah,
pop
knock
up.
on wood, knock, knock, knock. Yeah. But I've been surrounded with the most incredible community, and we just, my customers are so amazing. Like, of course, accidents happen. Are you kidding? We're dealing with hundreds of children. But the community, and like, John, you can vouch for this, like the neighborhood that we live in, John is my neighbor.
Oh,
The neighborhood that we live in, it's such an incredible community.
it's very cool. I
Yeah,
need to,
it's
that's
a
what I mean.
very,
I just
it's a
need to come
very
over,
like
right?
connected, it's a very connected community. Like you can find, you could, I run, it's one of those places you run into people like randomly, like it's just,
Yeah.
That's so nice.
Yeah, and it is a really tight community. Everyone knows each other. And also, I feel like everyone wants a children's theater program in the neighborhood. Like, I feel like no one's knock. I feel like no one's out to take me down because the neighborhood wants this here.
Yeah.
yeah.
How
No,
lovely.
I know from like when I first moved here, like I had just finished architecture school and I wasn't going in architecture, but I still had like the urban planning brain in my head. And I remember going to meetings and trying to get, so we had schools that closed down and things like that. And one was converted into condos a couple of years ago. And we had meetings that like, we need school children to be in the neighborhood. Like that's
Yeah.
part of having a healthy, vibrant neighborhood is to have school children running around during the day. They keep the corner stores open because they buy candy and soda and everything else. And that's how, and it's also a crime reduction tool because when everybody knows each other, everybody supports each other. And it's like one of those things, like you just happen to, you know, that's one of those things that keeps a community safe is that everyone's active. It's not
It's
keeping everybody behind a wall. It's like, it's becoming a member of the community. And that's, you know, that's one of those things.
it's so true.
So it's we're getting better at this, John. Oh, I was going to say it's 1959. It's not that time where you guys are, but we wrap up to about an hour. But when we first started this, we got into a terrible habit of going over, and we were like, "Oh God, we've made it like an hour and a half." So we're getting slowly better at rounding up. So I guess that would be a good place to round it up now. But thank you
Yeah.
so much for your time and
Yeah, thank you.
your
This was
lovely
great. I love
story.
learning about it.
Steph, John, thank you so much for having me and letting me talk about the work. I really appreciate it.
Oh no, it was lovely hearing about it and really interesting as well.
Thank you.